Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we get the right guests, ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. It's an interactive show, and tonight is a big show because we're speaking to arguably one of the busiest public sector people since 2020-2021. We'll be finding out how far the 2021 census has gone in terms of the specific reports and what we know from those reports and what these things mean for our development going forward. So when we come back, I'll be telling you more about my guest and why we should be talking to him about the 2021 census. Stay with us. So tonight we're trying to find out what we know so far from the 2021 population census. The census is usually held once every 10 years. We held one in 2000, we held another in 2010, but because of COVID-19, we had to do the 2020 census in 2021. Some key dates came to mind. In March, we were told there was 100 days to the census. Then end of June, we launched Census Night on June 27. Then between June 28 and July 11, we were enumerated. Other things happened. But by September the 22nd, the preliminary report was out. The man who led that effort is my guest. He's the government statistician, Professor Samuel Enin. Prof, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bernard. Good evening.
I'm surprised you are this cool. You've been so busy from I think, end of 2020 till now. You don't seem to be under much pressure now. The hard work is finished, right?
Yes, I mean, the peak of every census undertaking is the data collection part. Once that is done, then you take your time and do the analysis. So we are on the bend of the census taking.
The dates I give, are they a clear approximation? So March, you launched the 100 days. June 27 was the census night. 28 June to July 11 was the enumeration period. Then I think you also did the household something.
Yes.
What was that called?
Yeah, so you are spot on, Bernard. What we did was to launch the 100 days, as you rightly indicated, in March, specifically 19th of March. And we also did a 30-day countdown, which the president did that on behalf of the service. And ahead of the enumeration, as you indicated, we had to do the listing of structures, which spanned from the 13th of June to the 26th of June. So we had a 2-week window where we listed all the structures that we have in the country. And as you rightly put it, we started the enumeration of households on the 28th of June to the 11th of July. We had to do 3 rounds of mop-up to ensure that we get everybody counted. As you are aware, our slogan was that everybody counts, you count, so you need to, you count to get counted. So we did all that we needed to do to ensure that we had reached out to all persons in Ghana.
And by September 22nd, your preliminary results were out. Is that normal?
From a historical point of view, it's definitely not the practice in the past. During the 2000 and the 2010 census, it took more than a year for the provisional results to come out, but for the 2021 population houses census, we had to do it. We were able to do it within 44 days. Actually, while we were coming, I was reflecting on experiences in other countries. Kenya did its census in 2019, and it took them about 70 days to put out their preliminary report. So certainly, as the one of the fundamental principles of statistics says, you need to put out timely data, and that is what we've pushed our men to ensure that within 44 days, the provisional results were out.
So the preliminary report wasn't that big. Our newsroom did a story and picked out 10 big highlights. So I'm going to walk through to see if you agree that these highlights are the most important things. So they wrote a story on, what's this? September 23rd, the day after you released it, and they said, here are the 10 key highlights of the data provided. The first one was that our population is 30.8 million. I'll walk through all the 10 and you comment. That was the first issue. Second one was that there are more women than men in Ghana by more than 400,000. Third issue was that Greater Accra overtakes Ashanti as the most populous region. That was the third headline. Fourth one, Ahafo region replaces Upper West as the least populous region. Fifth one, average household size is 3.6 members. And then they give some issues about how it's moving, a decline. 11.6% or 10.6 million structures are metal containers, kiosks, and wooden structures. That was point number 6. Point number 7 was of interest to us. 20% of listed structures are incomplete in the whole country. That's 1 out of every 5. 8, Ghana's population has grown almost 5-fold since the first post-independence census. Number 9, our population is growing but at a declining rate compared to previous censuses. And number 10, this census is the first digital census as it employed technology in all aspects of its implementation. So this was a journalist's interpretation of the top 10 things. Is this correct?
I would say by and large, yes. But if I have to make inputs to it, I'll do a couple of inputs in that regard. The first has to do with what we think from the preliminary report. It lends itself to policy, which has to do with the population density as we saw from the 2021 population housing census. So population density is simply counting the number of people who live in every square kilometer. And we are emphasizing on that because of the variation between what we see in Greater Accra and what we see in the other 15 regions. So in Greater Accra, we saw 1,678.78 persons living in every square kilometer. And the next region that the second region was Central Region, which had 291. So if you look at the variation between Greater Accra and Central Region, it's obviously wide. And the least region was Savannah Region, which had about 18 persons living in every square kilometer. So that is one input that we would want to highlight, because we need to begin to think about the effects of this potential crowding on health outcomes and other flooding issues and so on.
So a developmental implication of the census results is the density, which we didn't capture.
Yes.
And you think it's a critical one.
Indeed.
The fact that Greater Accra is the most populous is not surprising. But were you surprised by the gap?
Indeed.
That Greater Accra was so dense,
Indeed.
And the next best was not that dense.
Yes, and that is the second point that I want to make. I want all of us to pay attention to the numbers rather than just the patterns, i.e. which region is leading and which region is the least. And that is the second point that I want to make. If you look at the population for Greater Accra, obviously for us, Greater Accra being the most populous region is not a headline story for us. But what is the headline story for us in terms of the regional variability is, if you add the population of the least populous regions, the bottom regions, that is Ahafo, Savannah, Oti, Western North, and the other two, their population is still 1 million short of what we have in Greater Accra and Ashanti region. So if you put the population for these 6 regions, you come to about 4.4 million, and Greater Accra and Ashanti region are in the region of 5.4 million.
So if we add Ahafo, Savannah, Northeast, Oti, Western North, and I think Upper West, still Greater Accra is more.
By 1 million. That is the emphasis. So let's begin to put emphasis on the numbers. So it's not just Greater Accra being the most populous, but the variation. And this is what we are seeing in the other reports that are coming up. As a country, we are beginning to see pockets of settlements in the northern part of the country, which is not consistent with what we see in Greater Accra. So when it comes to provision of essential services, the question is, do you just do it by a minimum population, or you do it by certain localities that are contiguous, so that you say that X number of localities are contiguous, so you give them an education or a health facility? And this is the conversation that we think is currently not happening.
The other thing we saw was the growth in population, still on the regions. Greater Accra was 4 million in 2010. It increased to 5.4. That was the largest. Is it just a migration issue?
For now, I'm circumspect in putting any reasons to it. Population dynamics are influenced by 3 things: fertility, mortality, and migration. In the general report that we're going to come up with, and subsequently the thematic report, is going to analyze these 3 things for us to make a determination on whether it's essentially migration or fertility and mortality is playing a role there. The reason why we need to think about this is that there are 2 things that are happening to inform the population changes. One is, as I indicated, how these 3 variables play out, and the other one is intra-region variation. So you could see Greater Accra that some part of it is being influenced by migration, some other part is being influenced by fertility, and mortality has been fairly constant. So one would definitely have to be careful in associating the reason driving the population changes that we are seeing. But it's important we say that Greater Accra is not the region that saw the highest percentage change. The highest percentage change was observed in the northern region, which was close to 50%, indeed about 49.
From 1.5 million to 2.3 million. That's significant.
Yes.
And again, you don't attribute any reason, because it looks like Tamale is growing pretty rapidly. And I don't know if in the second census, the second data set in terms of urbanization, that gives us any clue. But we're quite interested in the fact that northern region had grown that seriously.
Again, one has to be careful. Yes, we compared it with 2010 by disaggregating it by districts. So we're able to do the Savannah, the Northeast, and the Northern from both 2010 and 2021, where we have the 16 regions. But that is one thing that we need to take into consideration, as in whether the division of Northern region into 3 regions led people to move around the regions. Possibly that is what is accounting for people moving from, let's say, I don't want Damango to be my regional capital, so I want to come to Tamale where my regional capital is. So that could be a factor. But having said that, we're also seeing some pretty high rates from the fertility point of view for the Northern region. So again, this is the analysis that I'm saying that we need to do and take some context into consideration before we make any judgment.
The final point on the regional issue was Central region. When we analyzed the region for elections, we noticed that there was a lot of movement within the Kassoa, Ewutu Senya area based on the population census, the voter registration numbers. And it looks like the census results has proved that the growth in the Central region is largely dominated by the part closer to Greater Accra.
I have not paid particular attention to that, but on top of my head, I would not dismiss that possibility. We all see what is happening around Kassoa, Budumburam in terms of Central region and Greater Accra. So it's something that definitely the general report that we're going to do by administrative regions, where we're going to see what is happening between areas like Gan South and Budumbura, Kassoa area. We'll see how that is impacting on the population of the region.
So we did a census in June, July. We released a preliminary report in September, and yet we still don't know everything about the census. Why is that? How many reports are we to expect, and when are they coming?
Bernard, I'm happy you've asked this question, because we want to constantly keep persons in Ghana informed of what we've invested in.
Okay.
The census would bring us 7 traditional reports. In these 7 traditional reports, we have the thematic report and the analytical report. I'll come to the general report shortly. From the thematic report, we're going to have 23 independent reports. As you are aware, the census instrument had 11 modules, and for each of the modules, we're going to drill further down to see the cross tabulations. Now, we're not doing any cross tabulations. We're just doing the straightforward analysis, i.e. education by age and sex. That is the farthest that we are going. And from the analytical report, we are earmarking 80 analytical reports. The thematic report will span the period June 2022 to December 2022, and the analytical report will span the period January 2022 to end of 2024. So in essence, we're going to talk about the census data, its resourcefulness, at least for 2.5 years, as we started from September. And the general report that we're going to put out there before the end of the year is going to give us 11 general reports, which is focusing on the modules that we have in the 2021 population and housing census. So next week, we're going to put out the volume 3A, because volume 1 was the preliminary report. Volume 2 was the residential proximity to essential services report. So volume 3, which is our general report, would focus on 1, the population by administrative units, as I said, which will tell us what is happening at the district level. 3B will look at the age, sex composition, and 3C will look at the background characteristics. And the other modules, as I indicated, would focus on the other modules that we have in the 2021 PAC.
But why do we have to do it this way? Why don't you just release one big report for all of us to just consume? Because now I'm asking questions. We want to know why Central is growing. We want to know this, and we are asking. We are not sure. Is it not better to just put everything together when you are finished and release everything?
We've not done any study, but anecdotally we think that that is one of the reasons why we've not fully utilized the census data. So for instance, next week during the release, we are getting the Ministry of Local Government, Decentralization and Rural Development to chair that event, because we think that they are the ones directly responsible for what is happening at the district level. When we are doing the release on the literacy and education, we're going to write to the Minister for Education and ask either him or his any of his deputies to be part of the launch, so that we make it sector specific. One of the things that we want to do is what we call contextual engagement with the various MDAs and the MMDAs. So if you do one report, think about it. One report has about 35 to 40 pages. We're talking about 11 11 volumes of the general report. So it's going to be bulky, over 400 page document. It's difficult for the MDAs and the MMDAs to easily figure out. But once we engage them, as we are doing now, pointing them to issues that they need to focus on, we are pretty optimistic that that is going to increase the uptake of the data.
This is the point of view. My guest is Professor Samuel Enin. He is the Chief Census Officer or the government statistician. It's two roles bundled up into one. The 2021 census results are being released. Some will say tot. We have the preliminary report is out. When we come back, we'll be talking about this report that they call the House Residential Proximity Report to Essential Services. Simply means how close is your school, your hospital, or your bank, or your microfinance institution to where you live, and what does it mean for development? He's also told us that a couple of reports are coming up shortly. We'll try and find out what all of these mean for our development. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight we're talking population census, we're talking results coming in and what they mean for our development. There are a couple of things that have come up that somebody wants me to ask you. Almost every day on, not every day, almost every week on air, I guess somebody sent me a comment about enumerators not being paid. I don't know whether this has come to you. I just wanted to read one of those messages to you. And they basically say, since we finished our work, we've not been paid. And they want me to ask you, I don't know if you're aware of this, that where is their money? Your census enumerators, yes, good. He said, hello, Bernard. Some enumerators and supervisors who took part in 2021 population and housing census have till now not been paid. Can you please use your medium to help us address the issue? It keeps coming up. The last one that came was in the last week of October. So I don't know if you've heard of this. Is this something you're aware of? What's going on?
I mean, it's just the processes. For our district officers, they were supposed to submit reports before we pay them. The last time I was updated, only 111 out of the 261 had submitted their report. And once they submit, we start the process where we write to the ministry for that's Ministry of Finance to approve. And that process takes about 3 weeks. So if they delay on their side, and what I'm happy is that they are saying some of them. So it's not a general case. So any payment that is outstanding means we have some challenge in some deliverables not being met. And these are things that we say, once it gets to my attention, it will be resolved as soon as possible. So...
Somebody said we are at least 15 in Ablekuma South Sub-Metro, 14. So again, this is a comment that came in. It says, Bernard, he mentions his name, a little challenge. I work for Ghana Statistical Service in June and July as supervisor, and they paid others, but not some of us till now. All calls to get our payments for 3 months seem to land on deaf ears. We'll be glad if you could speak to the head of GSS to clarify why we aren't being paid. So I asked this person, okay, how many of you are involved? And the person says 14 supervisors and enumerators. I had 7 enumerators. The other supervisors had between 4 to 7. So at least 50 of us in Ablekuma South Sub-Metro. And then I asked, is this happening in all other districts or just your district? It says it's happening elsewhere. Just spoke to a friend who worked in Ablekuma West, and he also said not all have been paid. Then I promised the person that when I get you, I'll ask the question for them. So now that I've gotten you, so this is not just enumerators, but also supervisors. And this is Ablekuma West and Ablekuma South. So what's the answer? Is it the same answer?
The same answer.
Repeat it. I just want to hear it again.
It's the process that we have to go through. So, for instance, if somebody has not been paid because he did some support work, we look at the data that the person sent to us, and each person was supposed to do 12 households a day. So if you bring a claim and say we need to pay for 10 days, we are expecting to see 120 instruments in your name during the support, during the mop-up phase. So once we check and it's not there, we need to go back to the district data quality management team, ask reasons why it is so, then it goes to the supervisors and so on. Because really some of them were in the field, but they were not doing the data collection. And the support phase was not just based on the number of days that you are in the field, but actually the output that we saw during that period.
2 things from the first report that I thought I would ask you. 11% of our structures are metal kiosks, metal containers or kiosks. Does this actually mean anything? Are people actually living in these containers, or this just includes stores?
So yes, we've not disaggregated it by residential and non-residential, so one cannot make any case in terms of its impact. And that is why the thematic report and analytical report are important, because we now would cross-tabulate the type of structure by residence, whether it's residential or not. And what we're going to do really with this is look at the sanitation facilities around these metal containers and look at how this is impacting the livelihoods of people.
All right. And then the other point which was of interest was that 20% of all houses in Ghana are uncompleted. Is there a way to compare this to other countries? Because it seems to me as if uncompleted buildings are very many in Ghana. Is this something that we can compare with the 2010 results? Is there data on this in the previous enumeration?
Unfortunately not. As I indicated, the listening exercise is just to facilitate the enumeration. This is the first time that we are analyzing the data that we got on the structures. Otherwise, the reason why we collect data on structures is to ensure that during the enumeration you are able to capture everyone. But definitely there is something that we can check whether in other countries they do that or not. But Bernard, before we even do that, I think 20%, we need nobody to tell us that it's on the high side. Because it's about investment that you've sort of pushed in there and you're not getting anything out of it. So I would not push that discussion too much. It's just that 20% is on the high side.
Wow, 1 out of every five buildings in Ghana incomplete. Very serious indeed. Hopefully when we get the analytical report, we'll see what to make of this. Now, you released a report, I think last week, and you titled it Residential Proximity Report to Essential Services. Charlie, the words are very big. Is that what it is? How close is your house to essential facilities?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Why do we need to know this?
You know, we have standards for citing of essential services. So, for instance, if you are dealing with pre-primary school, you would want children to live within a 1 kilometer distance so that they can access the facility. If you are citing a health facility, you would want people to live within a 5 kilometer range so that they can access these facilities. So, I mean, we've seen instances where people in a very sick mode are not able to reach the hospital because they have to travel long hours before they get to the hospital. And this is one of the newness from the 2021 Population and Housing Census. As a country, we need to begin to think about people who are being deprived of access to facilities. So it's not just citing the facilities, but how close are the facilities to what we call residential clusters to minimize people not making it to the hospital just because of the distance.
So you group the essential service facilities into pre-primary facilities, primary and JHS, and then tertiary and that type of thing. Then you also had healthcare, financial services, which included banks and then microfinance and then police stations. So the health one was quite interesting for me. So because it looks like for health, usually the further it is, the worse for your outcome. So for developmental discussions, can we say that the health one, this one, it seems to be the most important? And this is a summary of what you had, the top 10 underserved districts in terms of structures more than 5 kilometers away. So we are basically saying that for these districts, the health center is so far, more than 5 kilometers away from most of the people who live there. What is the implication of this?
I mean, the implication is embedded in what I said earlier on. So it means if you go to Setra Afram Plains, and I'm going to say two stories about this. As I indicated, it means we have residential clusters that live 5 kilometers away, or they have to travel more than 5 kilometers to access the facility. So Setra Afram Plains is where we see a lot of the deprivation occurring. But that is the hidden story in there, is that because Setra Afram Plains, where we find it, we see huge inequality within the Ashanti region. So in one region, at the aggregator level, you see quite a number of districts in the Ashanti region accessing health facilities, accessing educational facilities, but we have other really deprived areas. And that is one of our main messages from the residential proximity to essential services. We see a lot of disparities in Ashanti region, followed by Bunu East region. So although on the whole, you see that Savannah has a lot more districts that are deprived, that inequality within Savannah, you don't see it. So you can tackle that problem from a regional point of view. But when you get into Ashanti region, you need to tackle it from the district perspective.
Wow. And you said the rural proportion of underserved is 46 times higher than the urban. That means that if you're in a rural community, you are going to be far away from these facilities 46 times more than in an urban area. That's serious.
So that is exactly what is happening. And this is why, for the first time again, we are not defining rural urban by just the population. So in previous censuses, we've just defined rural urban by whether it's more than 5,000 or less than 5,000. Now, in addition to the population, we are adding essential services within the locality for the definition of rural urban. So if your population is less than 5,000 and you have facilities such as education and health in that locality, we definitely would define it as an urban area. So that is not the population is not the only criteria, so that we can see the gap between urban rural areas. And you are right, the difference for health facility between urban and rural was about 78 as against 18, 78 in terms of deprivation for rural areas as against 13 or so for urban areas.
So our rural urban developmental divide is very serious. Do we know if it's getting worse? Is there anything we can compare to say the access to facilities for rural people versus urban people, the gap is growing? Is there anything we can use to do this?
We're going to do that from the thematic and analytical report. We've not done that yet. Okay. But clearly, as I said, we see the urban population, that is people living in urban areas, going up because of the migration that we see occurring. But if you look at it from the facility point of view, as we've rightly seen here, there are really areas that are deprived. And Bernard, as I indicated, we just need not say that there's urban-rural divide. We need to start a conversation on the extent of the divide.
So in terms of the healthcare facilities, yes. So we can basically say that these are the 10 least endowed regions when it comes to access to health facilities. And this will be correct.
Yes. In fact, I would put it, it's just a matter of preference, but I would say most deprived.
So the most deprived
district
as far as access. So Central Afram Plains in Ashanti, Central Gonja in Savannah, Sene West in Bono East, Karaga in Northern, Atebo Wamantin Bono East, Pro West Bono East, Krachi East Oti, Mion North, East Gonja, Savannah, Goshehu North. So you see 3 regions in Ashanti. Savannah region, Northern region, Bono East. And these are all very close together. So it looks like there's a central part of Ghana where, because in fact, if you put the map of these districts together, they are very close to each other. So what does this mean though?
I mean, if you are trying to develop from an unbalanced perspective, you tend to have challenges. You can grow, but the inequality would always dampen the growth that you are getting. And this is exactly what we are emphasizing now. And this is not the first time. From all our living standard survey, there's clear indication that inequality from a consumption expenditure point of view is on the ascendancy, unlike poverty that we see it going down. And now from access to essential services, we are again seeing wide disparities, not only from one perspective, indeed stark disparities from the education perspective, stark disparities from the health perspective. So clearly inequality is something that as a country we need to take serious and address.
Meaning that averages are deceptive. The point you made about Central Afram Plains and what you just said suggests that if we just use an average and say this is the average issue, it's not true. The devil is in the detail.
Indeed.
Good. So the top 10 most underserved districts for education. Viewers, this also means that the districts which have where people live farthest from school, right? So if they are going to cross a river or cross the forest or whatever, they will walk the longest to school. First one, Pro East. So the Pro East is the most deprived.
Yes.
Pro East is in Bono East. Pro West is in Bono East. Wow. Then Central Gonja, Central Afram Plains, Sene West, Banda is in Bron, Sene East, Bono East, Bole, Savannah, Kwewu Afram Plains. So it's the same 3 regions. Bono East, Savannah, and North. Same enclave.
And Bernard, in addition to the regions, you see some districts repeating. Central Gonja, you saw it in the health case, you see in Central Gonja, appearing here. Gushegu was there, you're seeing it here. Kora Franplains was there, you are seeing it here. And this is exactly the story that we want to tell. And if you don't mind, let me speak a bit more on the education. What we did was to look at it from the pre-primary, the primary, and JHS, and also we did what we call complete basic education. Let's all not forget that now Ghana is on the course of free and compulsory universal basic education. So we are expecting that at the primary level, we see that free and compulsory. But we have 112 districts that pre-primary is a challenge in there. And what I mean by it's a challenge in there is that about 50% of the residential clusters are beyond 1 kilometer range. And one of the things that we hope we're going to discuss with the Education Ministry is how do we align investment in pre-primary relative to the other levels? If you look at the education strategy plan now, a lot of emphasis in terms of investment between now and 2010, that is financial investment, is at the primary level and at the JHS level. The second thing that I want to highlight, the table that you just put out there, is at the primary level, which is where we seem to be doing relatively well in comparison with pre-primary and JHS. But this is the case where at the national level, where we have just about, indeed less than 10% of the residential clusters living beyond 3 kilometers, you go to other places and you are seeing in excess of 30%, like Pru East and Pru West, where we are seeing 33 and 31 or so % for these areas. So again, it's emphasizing the stark disparities that we have. At the national level, less than 10%, but at the district level, we see some districts beyond that. The third thing that I want to emphasize here is the complete basic education, having the pre-primary, the primary, and the JHS. And clearly we see that about 73% of residential structures are deprived from that perspective. So you see only a primary without a JHS, you see a pre-primary without primary. So for you to see all three, which is what is expected to ensure that we have the free and compulsory universal basic education, that is not happening. And that is the conversation that we think we should start having as a country.
This is very serious. And of course, there's another figure where you put education and health together. And again, you see Sesera Franplains, you see Banda, you see all these districts where there's a deprivation. You also do this for police stations and for financial institutions. Why did you do that?
We did that in the analysis, but throughout our releases, we focused on education and health. The reason being that we do not have that much of government control on the financial institutions because it's from a private sector point of view. So we're now thinking through whether we should engage the central bank or the banking college on how to package the conversation around proximity to financial services. But the reason why we include it is obvious. This is something that you want people to have they should have access to finance and also to have it in a secure way. That is why we do the banks, we do the savings and loans and the microfinance institutions. Indeed, one of the conversations that we want to have with the central bank is whether the clampdown on microfinance institutions, as we saw a couple of years back, has impacted on the number of microfinance institutions that we have in the country, and if it has, whether it's proportional across the districts that we have there. The second reason why the discussion on police obviously is a matter of security, so we think that there should be an in-house engagement with the police service in terms of packaging of the proximity. But definitely this is something that it should be of national concern in terms of how people feel secured. And let's not forget that it's one of the sustainable development goals. Indeed, the 16th sustainable development goal, where people feel secured in the environment within which they find themselves. So clearly, they are important essential services, but what we are doing now is to package that story to ensure that it has its maximum impact. This
is the point of view. We're talking to Professor Samuel K. Inin. He is the government statistician on the latest data released from the 2021 Population and Housing Census. There's already a preliminary report. Now we're looking at not just that, but also the proximity to essential services report. He tells me there are many more reports coming, 80 angles to the analytical report, 23 to the thematic reports, another 11 to the special report. So there's a lot coming. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight we're trying to understand the population and housing census for 2021, what the results mean, and all of this. So a couple of things. I'm on WhatsApp platforms where I've seen things circulate purporting to be from the 2020 population and houses census, and I wanted to just read one to you to confirm if you have released this. So on one of my platforms, they have broken down Ghana into ethnic groups, and they attribute, it's a WhatsApp post, good, 2021 population and housing census demographics, Akans 47.5, Dagmani 17, Ewe 14, Gadangbe 7, Guruma 6, Guan 4, Gurushi 2.5, Bisa 1, others. And they also break down Christian 71.2, Muslim 6, 17.6, traditional 5.2, others 0.8, no faith 5.2. Is this from any of the reports? I want you to take a look at it.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yes, is this from your report?
No. So let me be categorical on this. Ghana Statistical Service disassociates itself from this social media story on ethnic and religious breakdown. And the reason is that this is what we're going to do in the coming weeks. As I indicated, our volume 3C will be looking at population by background characteristics. And among the background characteristics will be issues of religious and ethnic affiliation. But Bernard, let's use this platform to educate persons in Ghana that we need to begin to be responsible readers moving forward. And why I say that is, even if you take our instrument for the data collection and align it with the ethnic categorization that has been done, it clearly doesn't sit, it doesn't fit. So in our instrument, we don't just look at even the spelling for Gadangbe. So
they write Ga Adangbe.
And if you look at our instrument, that is not what it is. And we don't do anything at the BISA level and so on. And the second thing is that people should quickly go back to the 2010, and whoever put this out there simply looked at the 2010 and for some of the categories gave the figure as it is, and others added +1, -2 here.
So this is obviously mischief.
Indeed.
But why would somebody do this and attribute it to the 2021 population? And it's shared all over. I've seen it. It was forwarded on many platforms.
It's a shame.
I mean, is it that they are in a haste and they want to force your hand to come and, you know, sometimes people put out the wrong information so that you come and correct and say that's not the case, or what could be going on? So, okay, just be clear. You're saying that even if you release the results, it won't be in this form.
For some of the, as I said, we don't have anything like BISA, we don't have we have Gadangbe in there, and if you recall, prior to the data collection, we said ethnicity would be done at the highest level of categorization. We're not going to do the further breakdown as in what is within Akan, what is within.
So you wouldn't say Akan, you wouldn't break Akan down into Asante,
we're not doing
Ekwapim,
that.
Achim, Kwewu.
This is exactly what we said.
Prior to that.
We would not do that.
Akan is Akan.
Akan is Akan.
But is Akan an ethnic group? Or I don't know. I don't know, because the Akans in Cote d'Ivoire too, right? They are different. They are even. So is Nzima Akan or is Nzima separate? Because I thought the Akan group is such a large group. So if you did that, would that not deprive us of some useful insights into the breakdowns?
So two things. First, we should all agree that the classification of Akan has become a bit muddied in the sense that people have crossed over. We are dealing with the fourth, fifth generations. So once you want to put down anything on ethnicity, one has to be careful.
Okay.
In terms of the intermarriages and so on and so forth. Then the second reason has to do with having a clear distinction between ethnicity and language.
Okay. Okay.
We most of the time confuse ethnicity
with
and language.
Okay.
And the third thing has to do with what you've explained in terms of identifying people based on location. Which obviously one would have to be careful when you are talking about issues of ethnicity. Okay. And that is the reason why in other jurisdictions, questions around ethnicity are no more asked in census taking. But definitely nobody can take away the fact that it's an issue of identity and possibly would inform the way people behave to an extent. But as to whether we'll get it accurately because of the mix that we've had over the period, it's...
So you're saying that because of the way this is, you will do it at the highest level. So you do every.
Yeah.
You would do Akan.
Yeah.
You would do Gadangbe.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do Fanti. You
No.
wouldn't do Anglo.
No.
So even for Gadangbe, you wouldn't do Dangwe. You just do Gadangbe.
Gadangbe.
Wow.
Yes.
And then there'll be Guan as well.
Yes.
Do you remember the other categories?
We have the Grusi, the Mandi. These are the.
What about is Moli Dagbani one?
Yes.
So you
Dagbani is
won't
one.
categorize into Mamprusi versus Dagbani.
So this is what I explained. I mean, once you get into that conversation, you're going to run into challenges.
I see. But you also do language spoken.
Yes.
So, for example, I'm Ewe, but I speak about 3 or 4 languages.
Yes.
So, wow.
So our volume 3D will be on literacy and education. And literacy is not just on English. We look at other languages, including the local language.
So they asked me whether I could speak English. I said yes. What other language can I read? Then they asked me what other can I write? And I thought, yes, I think they asked me a few questions. And I mentioned, I think, English, Ewe, Twiga. So one person can speak about 4 or 5 languages. So the language category will not show the percentage of Ewe speakers.
We will not even do that cross tabulation.
Why?
Because
you don't want trouble.
No, that's not it. Because what would you seek to achieve by doing that? For us,
what percentage of the population speak a language?
Yes. So do that independent of ethnicity.
So you separate it from ethnicity.
Yes. That's why our background characteristics will touch on ethnicity, and our volume 3D will do literacy and education. And from the literacy and education point of view, we are looking at it from the communication perspective. Whereas from the ethnicity point of view, we are looking at it from the identity perspective. So
there are 2 separate reports. So if I want to I have to put the 2 reports together and sit down and look at it for a long time to glean. Because don't forget, sociologists, social commentators also want to be able to draw insights. So you're saying I should, if eventually, let's assume in 3 years I want to do analysis, I can take the 2 reports and then study it closely and then come up with a conclusion.
Definitely, but I mean...
But you won't do that for me. You won't do that for me. GSS says that this WhatsApp message that shows 2021 Ghana population census demographics with the Ghana flag in the middle, Akan 47, Dagbani 17, he says it's fake news because they haven't even put this out. So if you see it on a WhatsApp platform, it's fake news according to government statistician. Again, religion, you're going to do a basic disaggregation, right? Christian, Muslim, traditionalist. Because some people put their no faith, 5.2%. In fact, somebody was even discussing it last week somewhere that, so people in Ghana, 5.2% have no faith. What does that mean? This is not your work. This is completely wrong.
Actually, there's nothing like no faith in our instrument. We don't ask any question like that. We have a category, no religion.
No religion.
That's what I'm saying.
No
that
religion.
We need to be a bit more responsible when we are reading some of these things. And as I said, whoever put this out there for whatever reason simply looked at the 2010 census and previous surveys. And we should all keep in mind that these 2 background characteristics are variables that change very slowly, especially at the national level. So if you go and pick the 2010 religion categorization, indeed in the 2010 it was 71.4, and now we are reporting 71.2.
So it's basically just doing plus or minus. And then they did the same for the Muslim as well.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Are there any questions about sexual orientation in the census? I'm asking because of LGBTQ plus issues. I don't remember what I was asked, so I don't know. Are there I don't remember. Was there any question about sexual orientation in the census report?
Male, female.
Male, female, that's all. You didn't ask about sexual preference. I see. And you didn't ask whether there was other?
Male, female.
No, these are interesting things. I see. So when will we get the... Sorry, the other question I wanted to ask. District reports. Because I remember in the 2020 election... No, in the 2012 election, one of the most useful documents was the 2010 district reports in terms of developmental issues. Because our constituencies and our districts are very similar, we were able to pull out developmental issues in constituencies based on the district reports. Are you going to do district reports this time?
Yes, we're going to do district reports. As I indicated, next week we'll put out the population by administrative units. So we're going to give the population figures just at the district level. But what we're talking about here in terms of district report is a detailed report about the district on all our modules for the 2021 PAC data collection. And this time around, as I mentioned, Bernard, earlier on, we don't want to sit in Accra and do it. We want to do this with the district assemblies. They're going to be part of the process of developing the report so that they would own it and use it. One of the things that we're going to do, as I said, is get the Minister for Local Government, Decentralization and Rural Development to be part of the process so that we're going to route all this through the ministry to ensure that there is uptake for the district reports.
I'm going to just walk you through what they call the the census release calendar. Product release. It's almost like they are manufacturing new cars. 2021 Population and Household Census Product Release Calendar. Preliminary report 22nd September, that's over a month and a half ago. Residential proximity reports, which we are discussing, is 19th October, which was like 2.5 weeks ago. The next report is the general report, 18th November. That will show age and sex profiles, socioeconomic profiles, and then population distribution by administrative unit. So this is 18 November. This is in how many days?
Next week, Thursday.
Next week, Thursday. Then you also have something you call thematic reports, fertility, mortality, and all these things, about 20 things. May to December next year. And the analytic report, July to May 2024. And then policy briefs. And all. Are these things for sale or they'll be free? These reports?
The reports are free.
Okay.
The reports are free.
So how are you going to pay for them? Who gave you the money to do it?
It was part of the census budget, and whatever budget that we had for the census is what is taking us to the release of the general report. For the thematic report and analytical report, we need to mobilize resources, and we've started engaging the various stakeholders on how to raise resources for those reports.
Do you plan to organize conversations around these reports, NDPC, media? Because obviously, it seems to me as if this is the basic development document for the country. It's almost like the baseline development issue. You shouldn't just release it, right? You should have a meeting where, for the specific areas, the ministry involved can come in, live discussions. Do you plan to do anything like that? So
this is how we explained why we are not releasing all the 11 models. And you will recall I said we do what we call contextual engagement. So for all the thematic reports and the general reports, we engage the ministries as part of the process. Indeed, for the thematic and analytical report, we're going to write the report having somebody from either the MDA or the MMDA as part of the team that will be writing the report. So definitely the strategy that we are using now, it will be difficult for one to distance itself on the relevance of the census. And I really like the way you put it. Indeed, the census data is the baseline data for all our monitoring moving forward. And from the census data, we'll be able to track a lot more of the sustainable development goals. We'll be able to track a lot more of the Agenda 2063, and indeed, for that matter, the Coordinated Program for Economic and Social Development Policies. So it is the foundational document that should guide our development. That is why we thought of the need to start with the President by engaging him on the findings from the preliminary report, and subsequently with all the releases, we're going to put them together and have time with the relevant agencies to sensitize them on it.
A few people reached out to us in the course of the announcement from September that they were not counted. So is it that there's no census that you count everybody? Or if you were not counted physically, doesn't mean you were not counted? So for example, if you spoke to me and I told you I have a wife and 3 kids or 4 kids, my wife cannot say she was not counted. How should we interpret I wasn't counted?
I mean, it's a conversation that we really are not encouraging for 2 reasons, and I like the way you've explained it. The first is that we spoke to households, we didn't speak to individuals, and we made it clear that the head of the household or any responsible adult in the household can respond on behalf of all the other members. So there were instances where people called saying they were not enumerated. We took their numbers, we followed up, and later it came to light that indeed an enumerator had been there and spoken to one of the adult persons in the household. And the second reason why we don't want to encourage that conversation is that clearly you're doing a population and housing census with the mindset that you are reaching out to 100% of persons in the country. At the time of releasing the preliminary report, we wanted to be confident that the figure that we are putting out there is within a certain region. So we compared the 30.8 with our projected population of 31.6, and we're within 3% range of the population figure that we put out there for the 2021 PAC. We didn't just use the population projection, we compared it with the projections from the US Census Bureau and the United Nations population projections. And within all this, we're within 5% range of the 30.8 that we put out there. Admissibly, there were areas that we had challenges in going to enumerate, and we did put it out there that those numbers were very negligible and they're not going to influence any statistics moving forward. So people that indeed were not counted, we would estimate their population, and these populations, as I've indicated repeatedly, they are negligible and would definitely not influence the 30.8 million that we have as a country.
Some people think the 30.8 million is rather low, and that we are probably much more than that. Is the 30.8 million the final figure, or when you finish all the reports, it could change?
Thursday, we're going to put out the final figure. That is what the general report does. The general report helps us to put out the final figure of Ghana's population, and also gives us the opportunity to do more disaggregated district level analysis, and also have a wider scope in terms of the modules. We are pretty confident that the figure is not going to change significantly. And what I mean by significantly are the statistics that I gave to you. We looked at our population projection. We are within 3%. We looked at the US Census Bureau projections, the United Nations projections, and all of them are within 5% range. So we're not going to put out a figure that is going to suggest that our population has increased from, let's say, 30.8 million to 33 million. I mean, it's not going to happen given the final results that we're going to put out there on the 18th.
Thank you, Professor Samuel Enin, government statistician, chief census officer, for this incredible insight you've given us. Clearly one of the busiest, possibly the most hardworking of these government appointees in relation to running a census. Thank you. Congratulations on what you do. We hope to hear from you on November 18 for the next report. And thank you for watching. We'll bring him back. There's a lot to talk about as we proceed with the reports coming through. Hope you've had a good time. Hope you've learned something new as we've been talking to Professor Enin, government statistician. We'll be with you next time. Coming up next is the Business Dashboard. Stay with CCTV. Bye-bye.